Amazing what is out there and the kinds of things people are doing. And of course, the people that I get to meet who are doing these things are just the coolest people in the world, because half the time they don't have any funding to do this. It's on a wing and a prayer. They just, like Clem, have an idea and say, you know what, here I am sitting at this bench and this science is too cool for me to keep to myself. So let me go out and find some students to share this with. I mean, that's the mindset of all these people. And those are the folks we need to connect with and then put our energies together with and say, great, you do this really well. Maybe we do this really well. Let's do it together. So, yeah. That's when it really starts happening.
I am curious about what sort of your relationship with IGEM, SynBerg's relationship with IGEM. Is there some sort of, is SynBerg allowed to have a lot of input with?
What is our relationship with IGEM? That is a really good question, and is morphing and changing. So IGEM, the International Genetically Engineered Machine competition, was initially hatched at MIT, and of course MIT is one of SynBerg's partner institutions. So, and it has become arguably was started in 2004, so we're talking 4 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. It sort of started as this rough little, it started as a class for independent study, sort of MIT I think has a tradition, I may be getting some of this a little bit wrong, but a lot of schools have a certain period in the year where students can take on these really interesting independent sort of, students or instructors can offer things that are out of the box, really unusual. And it started as one of those projects. Hey, let's just do this thing where in whatever the little period of time it was, the intersession or whatever it was, 4 weeks, let's just see if students can design a novel biological system and make it work in this period. And it sort of happened and it was really successful. And then it was like, how about if we get like 3 schools together and we do a little mini competition? We have like a number, like a team at here and a team at there. And I think it was 2 or 3 schools at first who participated, and that worked really well. And then it was like, hey, how about if we make this a real competition and invite any school? So it gradually grew. But so when it came into being as a competition, I think was in 2004. That's arguable, but. And SynBerg was founded in 2006. But all of the partner institutions, MIT and University of Berkeley had been participating since the beginning in IGEM. So as we had teams, student teams that had competed. So it just kind of was a natural that because we do synthetic biology and because at that point IGEM was emerging as one of the cooler and really more important annual events in synthetic biology, attracting most of the top faculty and many of the top graduate students from around the world in this little competition that was kind of growing word of mouth, very, very bottom up kind of thing, not at all hierarchical. It just seemed to make a lot of sense that SynBerg would play a role somehow in IGEM. And Randy Retberg, who is the director of IGEM, is one of the investigators of SynBerg. So, I'm just giving background, which may or may not be interesting, but that's what we're working with. We're working with an existing event that has kind of taken off, and that investigators at SynBerg are very involved with and have been since the inception. Drew Endy as well. Drew Endy, of course, is a principal investigator at SynBerg. Now he's at Stanford, but at the time was at MIT. And he and Randy were sort of the brains behind the opera. And Tom Knight, not to be forgotten. So what role SynBerg is taking? Right now, what role we're taking is we're giving a certain amount of funding every year, sort of basic, I think about a third of the operational costs of running IGEM. We're requiring that every school that participates, every campus have an IGEM team, and that they fund it themselves, with the exception of Prairie View, who we provide some funding to. Prairie View is our outreach institution, and they don't have as much research funding or as much research infrastructure as the rest of the schools have. So we feel it's fair to provide some funding to them to make sure that they have an IGEM team and that the IGEM team prospers, thrives. We're figuring that out. We're figuring out what our long-term relationship will be, as is IGEM figuring it out. IGEM has grown exponentially, and so things are being figured out, need to be figured out very shortly. It's going to outgrow MIT altogether and is going to have to move into some big conference. So far it's been very cozy. It's been able to fit into the Stata Center at MIT, and so it's been very MIT based, MIT organized, and that involves much less risk than going into a big international, into a big convention center and all that involves. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think Randy Retberg would be a better person to answer the question. I do know, though, as being very involved in education at SynBerk, that the model of IGEM is very much something that we embrace. And we would like to see more research being done along that model, where teams of students work together. Now, let me just back up a minute, but the traditional research model for, say, undergraduate summer research opportunities that has been funded for many, many years by the National Science Foundation is called a research experience for undergraduates, an REU program. That model is typically that a student comes into a faculty lab and engages with that faculty in mentored research over the course of a summer, be it 8 weeks to 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the number of weeks. And so that person will work with the faculty, typically mostly with a postdoc that is assigned by the faculty or that takes on that responsibility for the faculty, and will define kind of an area of that research as his or her own and take that to another level during the course of a summer. And at the end of it, present a paper or a poster about that research. IGEM is really a different model. It's a model in which students get together in teams, and they hatch the idea from start to finish. And then they come together at this jamboree at the end of in November at MIT, and they present their work in this international arena of other synthetic biologists. In many ways, the IGEM model much more closely mirrors what it's really like to be a scientist. Because one, you're working, you have to conceive of your research project and its goals, so you have the student gets a much more complete picture of what it's like to begin, and often those dead ends are reached. When you're working on a faculty's project, you're going to have somebody there to guide you all the time and say, well, don't go down this path because it's probably a dead end. I've been down that path, or somebody else has. It's known that that's not a good. IGEM doesn't have that. You could go down dead ends. The student it's much more self-directed research, but it's also in this team approach, and it's multidisciplinary, which I think increasingly science is moving in that direction. To wit, Stanley Hall, where we're sitting, is the newest research building on the Berkeley campus, and its whole reason for being is multidisciplinary science research, putting many types of disciplines under one roof. That's what this building is all about, and that's where science is going, because we know that the boundaries between chemistry and biology and physics and computer science are really don't help the science. They impede the flow of science rather than assisting it to go as far as it can. So we believe in the IGEM model. We believe in the sense of students empowered to develop their projects, to see them through to completion, to work in teams, know what that feels like, know how to do it better and better. It's a learned skill. Listening to your peers, communicating with your peers. And then working in these interdisciplinary teams.